Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So please ignore the shifting sunlight. First of all, I decided to film this super early in the morning because I was just so motivated to talk about these books, and I'm sure you can feel the same way when you talk about something that you really love. So today's video is just going to be a plain old book recommendations video, going back to the time when BookTube just did plain recommendations videos and reviews. Today's video is going to be about a accumulation of books that I have kind of dubbed under books that convince me not to pursue academia, or books that roast academia, because I think that academia needs some dissing sometimes. So just a little context. So my name is Alex. I just recently graduated from undergrad, and for the longest time, my dream has been to pursue academia, get a PhD in marine biology and become a PI at an institution or university and teach. And that recently has not been my dream anymore. And now I've had to deal with a lot of mental repercussions of what that means for me to be working up to this dream and then realizing that I don't want to pursue academia. And a lot of that is just a mixture of my own personal experience, but also these books as well, because I think these books do such a great job of revealing the intricacies and the nuances of being in academia without sugarcoating it or glamorizing it. So yeah, just a gentle disclaimer, this video is not to roast people who are in academia or make academia seem bad in any way. I know for sure that a lot of it is just me speaking up because it is glamorized a lot by social media. I think with the advent of dark academia and it being this glamorized, dark kind of aesthetic, basically, it's been reduced to an aesthetic where I don't think people realize that academia also can do some harm and has some harmful effects on especially students of color. And I think it's pretty good to openly critique these systems because these systems can always improve. And I think it's important not to sugarcoat or glamorize them in popular media. Anyways, enough jibber jabber. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that convinced me not to get a PhD. Okay, the first book that I have here is one that I recently finished, and it is Chemistry by Wang. And I know that the author recently published a recent book. I think Joan is Not Okay, something like that. And I know that that was super popular, and I did not realize that this book existed until someone told me that I should read it, and I'm oh, interesting. I hate chemistry, but let me pick this up. So anyway, this book follows a PhD student, a student pursuing a prestigious PhD in chemistry, and everything in her life seems perfect. She's pursuing this PhD, and her partner just proposed to her and is waiting on her answer of his marriage proposal, and everything just seems perfect. Her whole life seems to be looking up. She seems to be really successful in her field, and she just doesn't know what's not adding up. And I think this talks about the larger ideas of success in academia, of how it can be hard to measure such a thing, because I think there's a lot of stress and pressure on accomplishments and achieving so much that it's you burn yourself out really quickly. My favorite part about this book is that it definitely delves into the familial obligations and the familial pressures of being an Asian person, and I think in Asian cultures, I think especially, and I really like how it ties into this relationship with her family and how it affects the way she sees herself and the relationship with science. I think not a lot of books touch on that, and I think especially in this field of academia, it can be really hard, especially with the pressures not only on you to be a good scientist and a good academic, but also the pressures from your family to get your degree, to finish your dissertation, to get that doctor in front of your name. So I think that's a huge thing that this book covers, and is one that it does really well. And I think it uses a lot of dry humor, and this book can be sometimes quirky, I guess people would say, because I've read a lot of reviews and a lot of people called it a quirky book, and it really is. This book is definitely not everyone's cup of tea. You really have to get used to the author's voice, but I definitely think you will enjoy it if you want a glimpse into the sense of this feeling of hopelessness and this loss of self-appreciation, and more you discover that you are just not happy where you are, even though you thought that everything in your life is perfect. So this next book I have here is one of my favorite books of 2022 so far. That not saying that much because I haven't really read this much this year, but I remember after I read this book, I was like, okay, like I need to film a video about this because I've actually read so many books that like shit on academia. But anyway, this book is Disorientation by Elaine chou. This one just recently came out, so it's a 2022 release, and I remember when I read this synopsis, I was like, okay, like I need to read this book. This book is going to be one of my favorites, and it literally is. I think this is the best example of a book that uses satire to talk about the downfalls of academia and how it fails student of color. I've never really read a book that approaches satire or like dissing academia this closely or this like dramatically and exaggerated. And I think this book, balances a fine line of being too dramatic and exaggerated to being perfectly reasonable, and actually it feels like this could be like a real story that happened in history. I think part of it is based off of history. I'm not really sure. But anyway, this follows a Taiwanese American PhD student as she is desperate to finish her dissertation and get her degree on some part of impressing her parents and impressing herself, showing herself that it was like all worth it because she is 29 years old and she just wants to finish her PhD. I'm going to read what they have on Goodreads here because I think this is a really great sentence that explains this book, but it says, disorientation is both a blistering send-up of white supremacy in academia and a profound reckoning of a Taiwanese American woman's complicity and unspoken rage. I think this book even made me uncomfortable at times because of the subject matter and how it was, this reckoning of like the model minority, but also talking about white supremacy in academia. Like I was like low-key uncomfortable. Like I was like, oh my God, like they're really talking about it. Like they're really discussing it. Like in my experience in academia, it's something that's like not really talked about. And as a woman of color, I've experienced a lot of microaggressions, but it's kind of just like, okay, just like, sit down and like, cry about it at night, but no one really talks about it. So this book was extremely validating. And I think the discussions of internalized racism and how it affects academia in general and the hierarchy of it is super important. So I would definitely read this book. It is so good. So the next book we have here is The Love Hypothesis by hazelwood. Now this is a romance book, but it shows no love to academia. I was actually surprised by how detailed this book was in the experiences of being in a lab. I myself have, flitted back from lab to lab, had many experiences, experienced a lot of things, and this book kind of takes the cake for exposing this lab culture and how hierarchy is set up in like a scientific lab, especially if you are a woman and especially if you are a woman of color. So this book follows our main character, who is a third-year PhD candidate. Her name is Olive, I believe. Yeah, her name is Olive. You can't forget that name. And even though this kind of like lab space is used as a backdrop for the story, I really think that it does a good job of explaining the culture and especially relationships in a lab, because that is also a big thing, or like relationships in academia in general, because our main character gets involved in a relationship with someone who is at a higher like rank than she is and is more like accomplished than she is. So it really talks about the relationship aspect of being in academia. I will definitely say that this book could have done a better job of talking about internalized racism, especially in how academia treats students of color, because I feel like in this book, Olive's best friend is a person of color, and I just feel like the way it talked about her experience and kind of ignored it was not okay with me, and I've talked about that on my vlog if you want to watch it. But anyways, I think this book is still pretty good in the aspect of just learning more about what it's like in a lab and the culture of it and talking more about hierarchy. I definitely think this book is still one to read. Okay, and the final book that I have here is definitely the most unique one. I would recommend, if you read any of the books that I mentioned on this list, you read this one because it is the shortest, it is the fastest to get through, so you really have no excuse. The next book is So Many Olympic Exertions by Analise Chen. This book is always going to hold a really big place in my heart because my creative writing teacher for my capstone for my undergrad actually made me read this as my like supplementive writing. So it was always so special because I remember after reading reading this, I was talking to him and I'm like, damn, you really like know me so well, like you choosing this book. And it was really great because he had told me that he had like contacted my other teachers who I really enjoyed and contacted an author that I really liked to recommend me this book. So this book is just special and I really need y'all to read it. So this story follows a graduate student named Athena Chen as she learns about the death of a colleague from college, and it really is affecting her mental health, and she's plagued by doubts of, of her own self-doubt and also of her own success and accomplishments. So I think I really like this book because it definitely delves into the mental health effects of being in academia. This main character, she is like studying like sports journalism or sports writing. So this book is also written in an experimental, unique way where it's almost as if the main character is like reporting her life. And in this book, it makes a lot of comparisons of, like academia and mental workouts to like physical workouts and athletes and athleticism, which I think is so unique and such a great way to enter this field and enter this subject matter, because I think a lot of people don't really consider how much mental burnout and how much of a mental workout being in the academic space is, and how it can be just as grueling as athletes trying to compete in their field. So I thought this idea of just competition and success in general and how it's measured was an interesting conversation, and one that this book does so well. This book is definitely on the experimental side. It's written in fragmented pieces of like little chunks of text, but also interspersed with multimedia aspects of screenshots of YouTube videos and photos. This book almost functions as a dissertation itself, as it includes statistics and, citations from history that make it seem like it's like a research paper, like the main character is writing a research paper about herself. So anyway, would highly recommend this book, and yeah, I definitely think this is a good look. Maybe it doesn't really roast academia, but it talks about the mental health effects, I think, that are usually overlooked. So those are all the books that I had for this video. Let me know down below if you really enjoyed these more niche book recommendations videos. I know this was like very specific, but it was actually something that I'm super passionate about, which is talking about my experience in academia and also just in general books that are really good. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you are pursuing academia or interested in it down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.